I love this story so much, but I absolutely hate this story so much as well. And you probably already know which story I'm referring to. That would be Signalgate, which just keeps rolling on, and frankly gets more interesting by the hour. Some really big news today, actually. Let's start with Mike Waltz going on Laura Ingraham. He went on Laura Ingram's show on Tuesday night to make a self-defense. He said he takes full responsibility. He also had a couple of interesting moments where Ingram really grilled him. Here's what happened.
But I don't text him. He wasn't on my phone, and we're going to figure out how this happened.
So you don't know what staffer is responsible for this right now?
Well, look, a staffer wasn't responsible, and look, I take full responsibility. I built the group. My job is to make sure everything's coordinated.
But how did the number? I mean, I don't mean to be pedantic here, but how did the number?
Have you ever had somebody's contact that shows their name, and then you have somebody else's number there?
I never make those mistakes.
Okay, so Waltz told Laura Ingraham that he'd never met Jeffrey Goldberg. Jeffrey Goldberg's original Atlantic story. He's of course the editor-in-chief of the Atlantic. His original Atlantic story said that they had met a couple of times, indicated they weren't close, they didn't, talk often, but that they had sort of met a couple of times. And then Waltz said that wasn't the case. This tweet was quite interesting. It's a picture of Waltz at an event at the French embassy back in 2021. You can see there that they're standing next to each other. So that's at least one occasion when they presumably met. I mean, it's actually possible they hadn't met in that situation. Here in D.C., people get thrown into photo ops all of the time when they're at events. So maybe they exchanged a look or a handshake. But, the fact of the matter remains that Goldberg was somehow in Mike Waltz's signal contacts. And that could be for different reasons. We talked about this on the show the other day. That could be because he called Jeffrey Goldberg to correct a story. He called Jeffrey Goldberg to tell him he shouldn't run a story. That is something that people do all of the time. It could be for some sort of charitable reason by MAGA standards. It could be that he was put into a group against his own will with Jeffrey Goldberg by somebody else on Signal once. And then Signal added Jeffrey Goldberg, into his contacts, and he thought he was adding U.S. Trade Rep Jameson Greer or maybe somebody else with those initials. Jeffrey Goldberg just had JG as his initials on Signal. Those are all perfectly plausible explanations, but they are not the explanations that Mike Waltz is giving. Mike Waltz is indicating that there may have been something like hacking happening, like maybe a Joy Reid situation happening. His explanations for what may have occurred to put the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic into this group chat are utterly unconvincing and bordering on the absurd. But the story took a massive twist on Wednesday morning when Jeffrey Goldberg actually released more of the text messages or the signal messages that he had previously said were too sensitive to be shared publicly. Now, the day before, so throughout the day on Tuesday as the scandal raged, Donald Trump stood by Michael Waltz. Michael Waltz was at a meeting. Trump had said he was standing by Waltz. Waltz then went on Laura Ingraham, so the administration put him on TV. Elon Musk, Lindsey Graham, they stood behind Waltz. And there's something interesting going on there, by the way. Waltz is one of the very few people who is trusted both by Trump world and the sort of national security establishment. There are very few people that can get the full trust of Trump world. And Waltz never really had the full trust of Trump world. I suspect people like Tucker Carlson have never fully trusted Mike Waltz and probably have warned people in Trump circles to be a little bit careful with Mike Waltz. It wouldn't surprise me if that also extended to somebody like Donald Trump Jr. But that's where Waltz is such a unique figure. He's so hard to replace in that sense. You can see why Trump and Lindsey Graham and Elon Musk would want to cling to Waltz, because MAGA right now has the knives out for Mike Waltz. They're right now saying, people who never fully trusted him are saying, well, why did you have Jeffrey Goldberg in your phone? That's the bigger scandal. The scandal isn't that you were communicating sensitive information over Signal. It is that you had Jeffrey Goldberg in your phone. And so that's clearly an attempt to get someone they find to be an obstacle to the MAGA agenda out of the way. Trump, Musk standing by him because obviously they don't see him as an obstacle to the MAGA agenda. They see him as somebody who's sort of a bridge in a positive way from their perspective between both of these worlds. And there's so few people that can truly play that role. So that gives them a lot of incentive to cling to Mike Waltz. And it is why after Goldberg released the text messages, you then saw posts like this one from Caroline Leavitt, obviously the White House press secretary, who said The Atlantic has conceded these were not, quote, war plans. The entire story was another hoax written by a Trump hater who is well known for his sensationalist spin. Steve Witkoff, who was implicated by people who said you were actually by members of Congress, grilling Tulsi Gabbard and John Ratcliffe, who said you were overseas at the time. You were in Russia, you were in Moscow at the time these messages are happening. Witkoff comes out and posts this. I'm incredulous that a good newspaper like the Wall Street Journal would not check with me as to whether I had any personal devices with me on either of my trips to Moscow. He's referring to a journal editorial board piece about the lessons from the Signal scandal. He says, if they had, they would have known the truth, which is I only had with me a secure phone provided by the government for special circumstances when you travel to regions where you don't want your devices compromised. That is why CBS News reported that Goldberg himself said that he has not recounted Witkoff making any comments in that group chat until Saturday after he left Russia and returned to the U.S. Guess why, Witkoff says, because I had no access to my personal devices until I returned from the trip. Now, interestingly, that confirms that he was communicating in the Signal chat on his personal device. And we are getting so deep into the weeds here, but that's actually a confirmation of what a lot of people feared, is that they were using Signal just like the rest of us, that they were using it on their personal devices, which are extraordinarily vulnerable to foreign hacking. It's very possible that foreign governments, especially Steve Witkoff, the device of somebody like him. He is the envoy to the Middle East. He's been negotiating with Qatar, an attempted ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in the United States. He's been traveling all over the world. He's been trying to negotiate a potential Ukraine ceasefire. You can imagine that his personal device would be among the most vulnerable to having foreign interference. I mean, so the idea actually, I said this was in the weeds earlier, but this is actually super interesting. The idea that Witkoff is getting these messages with potential times or timelines of when, bombs are going to be dropped or attacks are going to be made on the Houthis. It's possible you have a foreign government monitoring what's happening on his device with spyware, and they're seeing that in real time as it's coming in. That is not impossible at all. So it's not necessarily great for Trump world that Witkoff confirmed the whole personal device thing. It's also, I should note, not great for the Wall Street Journal and anybody else in media who jumped to the conclusions that Witkoff had been participating in the group chat while he was in Moscow. So that's also not good. And it's not great. I mean, this is probably one of the bigger takeaways from the development today. It's especially not great that Jeffrey Goldberg, in his original story, said these messages contained information that was too sensitive to release, and then proceeded to release the information. So obviously it wasn't sensitive enough that he couldn't publish it at first. He only published it after getting hounded for not publishing it. And obviously if it is not sensitive enough that you can't publish it in the pages of The Atlantic, then it probably isn't the top tippy top secret that Jeffrey Goldberg said it was. But I will note that he's publishing it obviously long after the attacks have since happened, which is different than it happening in real time. Here's how CIA Director John Ratcliffe, interesting timing for Tulsi Gabbard and John Ratcliffe, who were testifying before the Senate on Tuesday, and then the House Intelligence Committee on Wednesday, having to answer questions about all of this both days. Here's how John Ratcliffe responded after Goldberg released the messages on Wednesday.
There's so much talk about this Atlantic article and about things that were said and that could have happened instead of a focus on what did happen. So my responsibility as CIA director, one of its responsibilities is to kill terrorists. And that's exactly what I did along with President Trump's excellent national security team. That's what we should be focused on. With regard to that article, I also would appreciate the opportunity to relay the fact that yesterday I spent 4 hours answering questions from senators as a result of that article that were intimating that I transmitted classified information because there were hidden messages. Those messages were revealed today and revealed that I did not transmit classified information, and that the reporter, who I don't know, I think intentionally intended it to indicate that. That reporter also indicated that I had released the name of an undercover CIA operative in that signal chain. In fact, I had released the name of my chief of staff, who is not operating undercover. That was deliberately false and misleading, and I appreciate the opportunity to reflect that my answers haven't changed. I used an appropriate channel to communicate sensitive information. It was permissible to do so. I didn't transfer any classified information. And at the end of the day, what is most important is that the mission was a remarkable success, is what everyone should be focused on here, because that's what did happen, not what possibly could have happened.
So this is obviously a really powerful response, and you can feel like the administration senses they have the wind back in their sails. Listen, I still think there's absolutely no excuse. I do think the story is being blown out of proportion. Probably every story gets blown out of proportion by partisans. I mean, of course the left is going to blow a story that makes the right look colossally bad out of proportion. They're going to make a story that makes the right look this dumb as big as they possibly can. The right would do the exact same thing to the left. That's just politics. So, do I think it's the scandal of the century? No, but it's significantly stupid. It's a reflection of ranking competence, and it now looks like a poorly executed cover-up from Mike Waltz, who appears to not be acting honestly whatsoever. So, on the one hand, though, you see the Trump administration circling the wagons around Waltz because, as we discussed earlier, he's a figure that is particularly hard to replace. He's an asset for them in that he does bridge the gap. He's able to talk to both important camps. The national security establishment is not just going to go away. They still, require persuasion. And he's someone who can kind of talk to both worlds, be an intermediary between both worlds. So he's particularly difficult to replace. And that's why the Trump administration today is jumping all over Goldberg's legitimately this is a legitimately bad look for Jeffrey Goldberg. Let's put it that way. I mean, I think the way he handled the original story, honestly, was a bad look, but I've talked to other journalists who have different opinions on this. Some think he should have gotten way more out of being in that group. Maybe he never should have left the group. He should have kept lurking and listening and potentially prodding them while he was in the group. I mean, that's an argument you'll hear from the left. On the other hand, there are people, and this is probably more the camp that I would be in, if I were Jeffrey Goldberg, knowing that a foreign government, in the same way they could be hacked into Witkoff's devices, could be hacked into my devices, I would never let this TikTok timeline play out. I don't think. I mean, it's easy to judge when it's not happening to you. I wouldn't let it play out in my phone, knowing that a foreign government could potentially be watching that happen as well. So, I mean, I probably would have immediately called the Waltz's office for comment and just to say, hey, is this real? And run a story about how they're doing this on Signal. I'm not sure that I would have just waited it out, though, because if they were, as Goldberg suggested in his original Atlantic story, he feared that it was perhaps a phishing attempt or a way to try to put him in a compromising position by bad actors, foreign hackers, whatever. And if that was true, maybe they're doing it to other people. Why would you not reach out and ask what the hell is going on? Again, there are differing opinions on this, and we don't need to get into them because I can see both sides of it pretty well. But the bottom line is they're really circling the wagons around Waltz, protecting Waltz, and now they feel like they have the wind at their sails because Goldberg said this information was too sensitive for him to publish, and then published it. So you can understand why the Trump administration feels like it has a little juice back. There's a piece of National Review actually disagreeing with the Trump administration's point that, well, hey, this was published, so it can't be so sensitive that you can't publish it in The Atlantic. So this is a piece that says, on Wednesday, the last defense of the Signal scandal died this morning. And the writer says, basically, do not let ignorance be your shield, and while I can already anticipate the hair-splittingly ludicrous next line of defense Trump world will fall back to, they're not actual documents with exact military deployments, it's just an executive summary. That's the quote of the anticipated argument. I would suggest that when you write, quote, 1415, this is when the first bombs will definitely drop, you're giving advance notice of when bombs are going to drop. The idea that this information in the hands of Russia's GRU, which is friendly to the Iranian-backed Houthis, is a good point, could have resulted in failure or worse, disaster, should genuinely disturb you. The idea that nobody in the administration is even willing to admit to error should disgust you. Now, you could be in the J.D. Vance camp and have urged caution and have wanted Vance to go further in urging caution about these attacks, period, and still say, by your own standards to the Trump administration, you were compromising your operation. It's hard to get around the idea that Jeffrey Goldberg's device could have been hacked, Steve Witkoff's device could have been hacked, anyone's personal device, as the Signal chat is happening on a personal device for people whom it was, there could be foreign actors that are reading your messages. And so that could be giving away sensitive information. Now, the question about classification becomes complicated again because some people have the power to just say things are declassified. We kind of went through this with the Trump administration. But seriously, the bottom line is that this was reckless. It's damaged Waltz probably in Trump circles indefinitely. But now, at least publicly, he is going to have the wind at his sails. He may not have to resign because Goldberg decided to release the messages after saying they were too sensitive. It just, for the normal news consumer who isn't following this TikTok super closely, it's like, well, all right, so you're telling me that it was super sensitive, but now you released the messages, and the Trump administration knows that, and they know it gives them wind in their sails. So I think this is a huge win for Mike Waltz. Now, people inside Trump circles will have less trust of him now. There's no question. They're going to think he's stupid and maybe careless or maybe just thoughtless. He's moving too quickly and incompetent and not ready for prime time. That's going to be almost impossible for him to escape. But it doesn't mean the public has to buy the administration's spin. And it doesn't mean the public has to believe that the media is just perfectly innocent in all of this as well, and that Jeffrey Goldberg is some type of like American hero for his conduct in all of this. You don't really have to believe either thing. So tough break for the Trump administration, but Goldberg really gave them a hell of a gift. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube wherever you're downloading your podcasts. And over at undercurrents.tv, you can get a premium experience of the show where we do episodes just for subscribers. You get a subscriber-only email, and you get a weekly email message from me. I actually write it, so head on over there to subscribe to the full edition of the show. We'll see you back here with more Undercurrents soon.